Nice and clear.
7 or 8 months.
Because Tulare wants us to come back for a third time. Okay, I have with me here Susan Shelley. Many of you know Susan Shelley. Raise your hand, Susan. So they can see. She's a taxpayer advocate. She's with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And she keeps us abreast. She does the CRA circuit. So if you're interested in having her as a guest speaker for your local chapter, you can contact her. And she'll make arrangements to visit with you. She does the circuit. I've seen her at 3 or 4 different CRA chapters in my area. And she is just an outstanding speaker. I'm so happy and privileged that she could be with us today. And I told her when I was first elected that the first opportunity I had to have her as a guest speaker for the state CRA, she would be getting my invitation. And here it is.
Thank you, Johnny. He is the greatest. Let's hear it for Johnny Moore. Now, that's the president. It is so nice to be here with the conscience of the Republican Party. Thank you all for being here. What a beautiful way to spend our Saturday. Well, I am so pleased to be here to talk about how we're going to save California. Because somebody's got to do it. And if not us, then who? So here's our problem. We have to recall a lot of politicians. They have an annoying way of getting themselves elected. And we're not going to look too closely at all of the election material and all of the ballot rules and all of the election laws that have changed that are helping them get elected and elected. But we are going to have to go after them at their foundations. And what are their foundations? If we can separate the middle class from the government class, we are the majority in California. The problem in California is that the government is run by public employee unions. And we are seeing that in California in such strong relief right now. It is just jumping out at us. Let's start with the bullet train.
Where is it?
I like to open with the jokes. Let's start with the bullet train, because the bullet train is never going to happen. Now, we were promised in 2008, and we tried to make sure they couldn't waste the money. Do you remember what was on the ballot? It had to be. It could not get the funding. It was $9 million in bonds, but it couldn't have the money unless it went from San Francisco to Los Angeles and back again. Both directions. It had to be built with no tax. It had to be able to run with no taxpayer subsidy, and it had to be built with no tax increase. Well, how did that work out so far? It's going, last I saw, from Merced to Bakersfield. You know, when I was driving up here, I was looking at the landscape, and I was thinking the one thing this area doesn't need is a bullet train. I mean, it's agricultural, it's gorgeous, it's one of the most important regions in the world, but it doesn't need high-speed rail. And fortunately, it's not going to have high-speed rail. Here's what they're going to build. Here's what they're going to build. You take conventional rail from San Francisco to the Central Valley. You take a bullet train a short distance, and then in Bakersfield, you take a bus. You're ahead of me on this. You've heard these jokes. You take a bus from Bakersfield to Los Angeles, and that's how they're telling the government and the courts that this is, in fact, high-speed rail between San Francisco and Los Angeles. And they have ridership estimates that they have cooked up with very costly consultants that say how many tens of thousands of people are going to ride this train instead of taking Southwest Airlines and the bus. They're going to get there in the conventional rail to the Central Valley and the little bullet train, and then the bus to Los Angeles. And they've got tens of thousands of people, and they figured out what they would pay in tickets, and they multiplied it, and they ran it through what they call a Monte Carlo simulation. Making that up. A Monte Carlo simulation to see all the possible outcomes, and they concluded that the most likely possible outcome is it would not need a taxpayer subsidy because it would be a success. And if you think that's bad, wait till you hear what they're telling the federal government. Now, President Trump saw through this, as he sees through everything, but Joe Biden does not or doesn't care. So what they're telling the federal government is, yes, they have to build a certain number of miles by a certain date of track in order to qualify for the Federal Railroad Administration funds, the grants that we got. Because they don't just give away the money for nothing, it has strings attached. One of the strings was a certain number of miles of track by a date certain. Here's what they're telling the federal government. Not in a row.
Wow.
We don't have all the land, so we're going to build a couple of miles here, and a couple of miles here, and a couple of miles here. Won't connect, but it'll add up to the amount of track that we're required, and therefore you have to give us the money. And they are in court. The state of California is in court arguing this. So we have a bus, and we have disconnected rail, and we have a Monte Carlo simulation, your tax dollars at work. Now, why is this happening? We know why Jerry Brown wanted a bullet train. He's had it for a bullet train since the 70s. He thinks it's the future. Gavin Newsom, when Gavin Newsom was running in 2018, he came into the editorial board of Southern California News Group. I'm on the editorial board. It's the favorite part of the job when the politicians come in, and you get to ask them, what are you thinking? I love that part. Because you never get an answer. And the answer from Gavin Newsom was, well, yes, but. Yes, the bullet train's completely impractical and can never be built as promised, but it could be a demonstration project, it could be this, it could be that. He was on both sides of the question. So he gets in office and he makes his first speech and he announces what sounds like he's canceling the bullet train. It's not feasible, it's not viable as envisioned. Headlines all over the world. Newsom cancels the bullet train. Within hours, he had walked it back. Well, no. We're not canceling it, we're reimagining it.
Oh
We imagine it going from San Jose to Wasco. We imagine it going from Shafter to Bakersfield. We're reimagining it, it's a demonstration project. You know, if it wasn't so expensive, it would really be funny, and maybe it's funny anyway, but it's awfully expensive and they're not going to be able to finish it. Why don't they call it off? The reason they don't call it off is because of unions that own the government of California that are making a lot of money from this contract to dig a hole and fill it in, dig a hole and fill it in, dig a hole and fill it in, write a report. And that's what they do. They write a report and they say, we've done a Monte Carlo simulation that for every hole we did, we've created 30,000 jobs. They're making it up. They're making it up. But the unions are controlling the state against all rational argument. And what is happening with the teachers' unions in California? Even more so. Even more so. The CTA, the California Teachers Association, spends more money in politics than any other group, even the business groups. Even if you add up the business groups, the CTA spends more. Now here's the governor of California facing a recall. And if the CTA backs him, he will have the money he needs or thinks he needs to defeat us. And if he doesn't do what they want, they'll give that money to somebody else. And they will cut him loose faster than he can say his name. And that's what he's worried about. That's all he's worried about. Does he care about your kids and your grandkids? He does not. Does he care about the future of the state of California? He does not. Does he care about all the parents who have had to leave their jobs to take care of their kids, who are struggling economically in a state where we already have the highest cost of living and the highest poverty rate in America? Does he care? He does not. What does he care about? The teachers' union support. So here's what he's done. He has signed a bunch of things that look like he's reopening the schools. Lots of press releases. And you dig down a little, and he's saying it's up to each local jurisdiction to negotiate with its labor partners. Well, in Los Angeles, they took this power that they had, which is effectively a strike without picket signs. It's a strike without picket signs. They took this power that Newsom gave them because he could have ordered the schools open as other governors did. Just the way he ordered them closed, he could order them open. And instead, he gave them this power, and the teachers union in Los Angeles negotiated $500 a month for child care. for anyone with kids 5 and under. Now, it's very nice to have money for childcare, but everybody's in the same boat. Every other public employee union is going to want that. And it only goes through July, so LAUSD's unions are going to want that again too. Where is the money going to come from? LAUSD was already so close to bankruptcy in its 3rd year of budgeting that the county almost took it over in 2019. Where is this money going to come from? Well, guess. I'll give you 3 guesses, and the first 2 don't count. They want to raise taxes. They want to raise taxes. They wanted to raise property taxes on businesses. So a place like this, no matter how long it's been owned, would be reassessed to market value, and the owners would have to pay 1% of the new market value as a condition of keeping it, and that would be reassessed at least every 3 years.
Wow.
That was what was Proposition 15 on the ballot, and thankfully it was defeated with the help of all of you and the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and everybody who told the voters what that was really going to do to the state of California. Imagine that. They said they were going to exempt agricultural property, but they weren't going to exempt agricultural buildings. You know how many facilities and plants and all of the buildings that are associated, the barns that are associated with agriculture, with dairy farming, with all of that. All of those would have been reassessed to market value. What would that have done to prices in California? And we're already paying the highest prices in the country. I think maybe Hawaii has a tiny edge on us, but not by much, and they're an island. So we have got to educate our neighbors and our friends, and even our family members, yours are like mine. We have to educate people about how the problems they're having in California are caused by the policies they think they support. They think they support the teachers' union. They think they support the climate agenda. They think they support a ban on fracking. They have no idea what these different bits of legislation and what these different groups are doing to them. Instead, they're online on some real estate website shopping for property in Tennessee. And they're leaving. We're not leaving. We're not giving up California to socialists to be run into the ground like Cuba and all these other countries. That is not going to happen in California while we're here, and we're not leaving. Anybody here have a U-Haul booked? Cancel it. Go ahead, cancel it. We're not leaving. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to beat the Democrats on the issues where we have common ground with the other side. And one of them is single-family neighborhoods. Have you heard what they're trying to do to single-family neighborhoods? Well, I have to tell you, I get email from lots of people from the columns and at Howard Jarvis, and I can't even tell you how many emails that start out, I'm a bleeding heart liberal, but what they're doing to housing in California is insane, asinine, stupid, crazy. Fill in the blank. Liberals, Democrats, people who would not vote with us on lots of issues are with us on this one. Now, here's what they're trying to do in Sacramento. Senate Bill 9, which last time was Senate Bill 1150, if any of you follow this closely. Senate Bill 9 would allow, by right, subdivision of every single family lot in California. Every single one. Every single family lot could be cut in 2. And it's not just 2 residences, it's 4 residences.
Wow.
And the reason for that is AB 68 and other legislation from a couple of years ago. AB 68 said there's a right to have an ADU on any property, even if you're in a community that has covenants, codes, and restrictions, an HOA that says you can't have an ADU, a granny flat constructed in the yard. Now you can. Those covenants, codes, and restrictions are unenforceable in California. By right, you can have an ADU on any property. So if you subdivide every lot by right, and you allow an ADU on every lot by right, then where there is 1 house, there will be 4 houses. There will be 4 residences. And in some areas, there will be 6, because previous legislation said you could have a junior ADU, which is a garage conversion or a bedroom conversion. So now you've got 1 residence on a residential street that the state of California has mandated cities approve for up to 6, if SB 9 passes. Without SB 9, it's up to 3, but with SB 9, it would be potentially up to 6. And they have prohibited the cities from requiring off-street parking. So if you bought a house and you spent all of your savings and all of your life's earnings and you made payments for 30 years because you didn't want to live in density, you didn't want to live in an apartment with people walking on top of your head and under your feet, you wanted to live in a house with a yard, with a driveway, with a basketball hoop. And you spent your whole life savings and earnings to get that. And maybe you and your spouse together, 2 incomes, your whole life savings and earnings. And you want to give that to your kids. They're coming for you. They're coming for you. They want to make sure that nobody can ever come over to your house and park on the street because you're going to have triple density, quadruple density. You're going to have insane density, and the cities can't stop it. Now, in some areas, maybe that would work just great, but in other areas where the population is very dense and the lots are small, it won't work at all, and it will ruin what people have in this state. This is a great issue for Republicans. This is a winner of an issue to block SB 9, and let me tell you about SB 10. There's never just one. They're like cockroaches. SB 10 would say that in an area where it's jobs rich or transit rich, which is defined loosely, I think transit rich means there's a bus stop somewhere. If you're within half a mile of a bus stop, you're a transit rich area. And your city would be allowed to pass an ordinance that would create a right to build a 10-unit apartment building on a single family lot anywhere in that radius, anywhere in your city. Now here again, in some areas maybe that would work, but if a city the size of Los Angeles, with its very liberal city council, were to pass such an ordinance, and every single family lot in Los Angeles could be built into a 10-unit apartment building, I mean, people could wake up in the morning, they could look to their right, they could look to their left, they would see construction fences and apartment buildings going up. It's already happening in some areas. I know someone in Pasadena who has an old Craftsman house in the 20s, got an apartment building going up next to it. That's an impact on your life. If it happens across the street from you, next door to you, that's the end of your neighborhood. That's the end of what you bought. And now if you want to live in a low-density area like the one you bought, you have to pack up and move. And you can't move in California because it could happen anywhere. This has to be stopped. This has to be stopped. The answer to the housing problem in California is hidden in the climate agenda. The climate agenda is what is causing the housing crisis in California, and here's why. It's causing the housing crisis because we have what Al Gore called an anti-sprawl policy. Al Gore thought sprawl was bad. Sprawl is when you build a community of houses. You build housing developments in outlying areas. He called that sprawl. He said it's bad for the climate. California is all on board with that. Oh yes, vehicle miles traveled is a bad thing. And so a community of houses that's far from jobs is a bad thing. And therefore, we're going to put it under CEQA so people can be sued for it. So now you've got things like in North LA County, you've got this Centennial development, which is still going through the greenhouse gas reduction litigation over how many miles people are going to drive to get to it. Even now, in the post-COVID era, when people are doing more Zoom and more remote work, and it doesn't matter, and there won't be as much driving as they figured there would be, they're still putting it through all these EIRs and litigation and all of this. When this project was announced, it was so long ago that the governor in the photo was Schwarzenegger. And it's still not approved because it's an outlying area. That's what's causing the housing crisis. We have what's called an urban boundary, an invisible line beyond which you are not allowed to build housing unless you mitigate and mitigate and pay, and it doesn't pencil out. At a certain point, you can't make money doing that, so nobody's doing it. So we don't have enough housing permits being pulled. We don't have enough housing being built, and people are leaving the state. And it's the climate agenda. Now your neighbors and your friends and your relatives that you spend Thanksgiving with who are so on board with the climate agenda don't know that. They don't know that. They think the only answer to housing is density. Apartments on top of train tracks. Guess what? That's a failure. That's as much of a failure as carpooling. We still have carpool lanes. Nobody carpools. That's just an absolute fact. Year after year, we've got this 1970s policy of building carpool lanes. But But there's a method to their madness. They plan to turn them into toll lanes in California. So you're paying to build it, and then you're going to have to pay to use it. And eventually, when they get all the toll contracts written and everybody gets their campaign donations and there isn't another penny to be shaken out of anybody, they'll turn it into a toll lane, and we won't hear any more about diamond lanes. Won't hear any more about cardinals. These are idiotic policies. California is being destroyed by blithering idiocy. Our water policy, blithering idiocy. Blithering idiocy to starve the farms, to starve the cities, to tell people to drink toilet water, when we have the most magnificent water infrastructure in the history of civilization, built in the 1930s and the 1960s, and by the way, you're still paying for it. The 1960s project, the State Water Project, still on your property tax bills, and if they build that silly tunnel, it'll be on your property tax bills again, because they're calling it, you ready? Maintenance of the State Water Project. The Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is all over that. they're not gonna get away with putting it on the property tax bills, but it will be in the water rates. Wow. It will be in the water rates, and guess what? It's the same people. So it's this pocket or it's that pocket, but the same people have to pay it. So we have to look at water policies, power policies. You know, we had a little bit of a lucky break. I'm just going to say lucky, because it'll probably be back. But the fracking bill died. The anti-fracking bill died in its first committee. This was a good thing. California is an oil-producing state. There's only about 6 states that produce more oil than we do. And we need it. And since, I think 1985 was our peak production year, and at that time, only 5%, I think 5.5% of the oil that went to California refineries came from foreign countries. And as we cut back how much oil we were producing in California because of the environment, as we cut it back, we've been importing more foreign oil. It's now more than 50% foreign oil. We also import from Alaska, but the foreign oil is more than 50%. It was 5%, and now it's more than 50%. And the same with electricity. The green agenda says we can run the state on sunshine and breezes. Like a Rembrandt painting, windmills and sunshine. But the actual fact is California imports more electricity than any other state because we can't run the state on sunshine and breezes. And everybody who does this for a living will tell you that. We're importing electricity. This is why your bills are so high. Your bills are high for food. Your bills are high for transportation. Your bills are high for water because of these idiotic policies, which could all be changed with the right governor. Most of these are done by appointees in departments, in agencies, and that can all be changed with a better governor. So how do we win? How do we win in California? We talk about housing density, we talk about utility costs, we talk about water policy. We smile and we argue with them in a civil manner, and we just keep pointing out that these policies are failures. The politicians on the left have no answer except to say California must show leadership. Nobody's following. I think it was John Boehner who said, a leader without followers is just a guy taking a walk. And that's what we're doing in California. We're leading our way into poverty that no one else wants. No one wants our poverty rate. No one wants our utility costs. No one wants to be told they have to ration water when they're sitting on the edge of an ocean. Not to mention the water infrastructure from up north. There are solutions to problems, and we are intentionally rejecting them in this state.
Good.
So, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk to our friends and relatives. We're going to fight SB 9 and SB 10. We're going to fight against the union agenda without fighting against the union members. This is a tricky thing. You can't go out and criticize teachers because a lot of people are teachers, and a lot of people love teachers, and teachers are not the issue. The union agenda is the issue, and that is becoming clearer and clearer. So it's really important when you talk about the public employee unions that you not make it personal against the members of the union. We have to be smiling, we have to be civilized, and we have to be relentless. Relentless. And you can't fight these wars just once because the battle comes up again and again and again. The left is relentless. But the left is wrong. And the left has no track record of success.
Right.
They have nothing to point to. They can't point to a country where their policies are successful. Because there's not going to be one, because their policies are failures. The only people who benefit from the left's policies are people who want to control other people's lives. They have found their way into politics. They are rigging the system, and that's another issue. Another issue for another day is the rigging of the system. But that's all the time we have. Do you want me to take any questions? Everybody wants lunch.
Two questions. Two questions.
You
The Senate Bill 467, oil and gas fracking.
Yes.
It's up for reconsideration.
Yes, it's up for reconsideration, but the reporters who cover it are calling it a dead bill, so I think that might just be a technicality that they granted it reconsideration.
I want to make a comment about the train. You called it a bullet train.
Yes.
7 years ago, we brought a young man from China. One of the first places I took him was the state fair.
Russell, what's your question? Everybody's hungry.
It's not a bullet train. It's a high-speed train. It's not a bullet train. So let's let people know it's 17-year-old technology. It's 17-year-old technology, and it's no bullet trains here. High-speed is better. We're wasting money.
We sure are wasting money, no question there. Thank you.
Thank you for that statement, Russell. Thank you to Shelley. Pardon me?
Results for questions. You said 2 questions. I've got a question.
Okay, let's hear your question, Rick.
Susan, thank you for coming. What did you say to people who say that Gavin Newsom will not face a recall because what he will do is get Dianne Feinstein to resign her Senate seat. He will appoint himself to her Senate seat, resign his seat, and there won't be a governor recall election.
Well, that could happen. That could happen. They could do all kinds of things. Have you seen, I think it's Senate Constitutional Amendment 3, which would allow the governor's name to be on the replacement ballot. Now, supposedly it wouldn't apply to the last election, but they could make it urgency and they could do a special election and they can do whatever they want. They're unconstrained by moral law in Sacramento. They can do whatever they want. So it's true that Gavin Newsom could appoint himself to the U.S. Senate. I don't think they're going to get Dianne Feinstein out of there with dynamite. A lot of people think that Gavin Newsom will resign so that the lieutenant governor can take over and the Democrats can hold the office. I don't think you're going to get Gavin Newsom out of there on a resignation. I don't think you're going to get him out of there with dynamite. These people only care about power. They only care about themselves. And I think you can bet on that. So if Las Vegas would allow it, I'd put the house on that. I'd put the house on the fact that they'll never get those people to go willingly. Thank you.
Let's give Susan a round of applause. I keep telling her I'm her biggest fan. We have a certificate of appreciation for Susan, and it reads the California Republican Assembly, or CRA. On this 17th day of April 2021 in Visalia, California, hereby bestows the certificate of appreciation to Susan Shelley for her contribution and participation as keynote speaker at the 2021 annual convention of the CRA, held at the Lamplighter Inn in Visalia, California, and it's signed by myself, Johnny Morgan, CRA President, and Carl Brickey, CRA Executive Vice President.
Thank you.
Okay, guess what time it is? But before I dismiss you, you need to know one important thing, because we have to leave this particular building.